Georgia's a huge favorite in this game, as we would expect, about 9 to 10 points, pretty substantial. Have you had a chance to look over the Wildcats? Have you seen them much this season?
I've actually watched the Kentucky-Missouri game last night and kind of got a feel for it. And while I've been sitting here listening to you and Steven talk, I was looking up a little bit more about them and stuff, so I'd have a little bit better understanding than I did last week for sure. So
They somehow find a way, don't they? Well, the defensive side of it is not too difficult to figure out. They are just plain good with the likes of Jordan Jones and Mike Edwards and company. They are really good on the defensive side of the ball. They continue to hold down opponents in the SEC to 7, 10, Drew Lock, 14 points. So there's no mystery on that side of the ball. They're just flat out good. Now, on the offensive side, they got the game that they needed out of Terry Wilson, and specifically the one drive out of Terry Wilson they needed in a game in which he threw for like 230 yards. That was by far his biggest passing output of the season. But I was looking through that game, Savannah, and yeah, the defense completely kept them in the game. They get the one big special teams play to get them within 14-9. And other than that, I looked at the drive chart, Savannah. They went 11 straight possessions without scoring a point on offense and still won the game.
Well, yeah. That's a pretty telling stat, actually. And to be honest, I don't know that they're going to be able to continue doing that. You know, that kind of luck always eventually runs out for teams who are usually one-sided on the offense. Like Kentucky, most of the time they're depending on Benny Snell, Terry Wilson to use their legs and get stuff done on the ground. But Terry Wilson is also going to have to, he's going to have to throw the ball if they want to defeat Georgia. Georgia has the best passing defense in the SEC right now. And with DeAndre Baker going to be on Lynn Bowden Jr., I don't know that Kentucky's going to be able to really get a passing game going, to be honest with you. It's just not – I mean, Georgia's secondary is just way too good. Kentucky does not have the targets in that area, in my opinion anyway, that can really get the job done. It's not – they have Benny Snell. Whenever you think of Kentucky, you think of Benny Snell. Of course, Terry Wilson has really made a name for himself throughout this season. I mean, he kind of has to, being the other key link to the offense. But at the same time, I don't know that they really played a defense of Georgia's mentality, if that makes sense. Even though Georgia's hasn't been up to par like they were last season with Roquan and them, I also think that Georgia's defense continues to get better each week. And after the loss to LSU, they kind of had a come to Jesus meeting, and they have done better. They didn't stop the run like they should last weekend, but it was an improvement in my opinion. So Kentucky's going to have to find a passing game if they want to keep up with Georgia.
Well, they found a passing game, as I mentioned last week, or at least for them, a semblance of a passing game, but it all came on basically one drive, and it goes to one guy. The same guy catches all the passes, and I'm exaggerating to a certain extent. They've got a decent tight end in C.J. Conrad, but Lynn Bowden caught 13 passes last week for $166, and they don't target him quite as much every week, but basically he's the guy in the passing game. So I guess Adrian Baker, go cover him and lock him down, and we should be fine, and everybody else gang up on Benny Snell.
Well, I honestly think that, not to just sit there and say that Georgia's probably going to pull in everybody to sell out and stop the run, but at the same time, that's what's going to be able to get Kentucky third and out and get them off the field, to get Georgia's offense going and everything. And to be honest, Missouri has the number 12 passing defense in the SEC out of 14, Kentucky being number 13 behind them. And that's just in SEC games alone. So, I mean, it's not like Terry Wilson was really throwing up against any secondary that can really that is similar to Georgia, especially because, I mean, Georgia is crazy good.
Can I interrupt, Savannah? I want to get something straight here. You just told me that Kentucky is the second worst.
When I was looking at stats on Sunday, I was looking at offenses. That's my bad.
Okay. Yes. Kentucky is extremely good on offense. And I don't buy into the whole total yardage deal. It's an indicator, but that obviously if you're Alabama and you're winning every game by 40 points, then the other team's throwing the ball constantly. They're going to gain meaningless yardage.
Yeah.
So you can take that a number of different ways. But for Kentucky, it should be pretty accurate because they play close games against everybody. They played Vandy 14-7. They play close games against everybody. And so actually their stats should be pretty meaningful because they're not playing any garbage time
Oh yeah,
compared to
that
the
was
other
my bad.
teams.
I was looking at the offense instead of the defense. I clearly need glasses. But for sure, Kentucky's played everybody close this season. However, I also think that a lot of times when they do play these teams, they on the defensive side of things, they shut down what works the best for that team. I don't know that Kentucky's defense is going to be able to do that. What I'm trying to get at is I think Georgia's defense is going to be able to stop Benny Snell and Terry Wilson and whoever else and push them to third and long, get off the field, and essentially do what LSU did to Georgia. Get that defense gassed and just be able to run all over the defense. I thoroughly believe that Georgia's going to stick to a run-heavy offense and make Kentucky stop them. I mean, DeAndre Swift looks almost back completely healthy, and then you also have Elijah Holyfield that's still running with a lot of purpose. And so I think my main point is, regardless if you're looking at stats or anything like that, is I don't know that Kentucky's defense has seen an offense this lethal and this high-powered, putting up 400-plus yards of total offense a game. So that's going to be the interesting part to me is how if Kentucky's defense can hang on, and if Georgia's defense can do what they're supposed to do. I guess it's kind of one of those things. It's like you just do your job, and it's just going to work out.
Okay, Savannah, let's be honest here. I want you to be completely honest. You have absolutely no concern about this game. None.
Well, I did earlier in the week. And then I started watching some film on Kentucky, and I got to give Josh Allen credit because that kid's good with 14 and a half tackles for a loss. I mean, that's incredible. But like I said, Georgia's front seven is continuously getting better. Going to get Kentucky's offense off of the field, and I don't necessarily. I mean, there's no concern, yeah, but also at the same time, I know how good Georgia's team is, and Kentucky has never played on a stage of this level and this magnitude. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this much pressure with the SEC East title on the line. Georgia's been there. Kentucky hasn't.
That's very true. If you look at it that way, that if you just look at opponents, they've played a lot of good opponents, maybe not quite as good as Georgia, but they played Florida. They played Texas A&M on the road. They played Mississippi State. They've beaten a lot of good teams that are kind of a step below Georgia, top 25-ish kind of teams. So I don't know that they're going to be wowed by they play Georgia every year. They know what the talent level is and the speed. But you're right. If they really let it sink in, okay, this is the game for everything. If we win this game, we just take care of business against teams that we should, and we are going to the SEC championship game. This is it. Whereas Georgia, yeah, this is more, okay, we made a run through the SEC last year. We beat Auburn in the championship game. We played a college football playoff at the Rose Bowl. We played Alabama for the national championship. We went to Death Valley a few weeks. They've played, 6 or 8 games kind of like this game. We went to Notre Dame last year. Mm-hmm. Those kids have played, a number of stages that were like everybody, bam, watching the game, focus on this game, got to win this game. And this is kind of a first deal for Kentucky.
Exactly. And to go on what you're saying about Georgia being in play, this is the third week in a row, besides a bye week, again, of course, before Florida, that Georgia's played a top 10 opponent. Is that, because Florida's number 9, and now it's a top 10 opponent for the third week in a row. And I think that says a lot to people sitting there saying that Georgia is not necessarily playing a lot of people, but at the same time, as Georgia sits on the stage every single week, competes on the stage every single week, and Kentucky's kind of cruised through it. They beat Florida and ended the streak, and that was wonderful for them. And I'm giving complete credit for them. It's awesome that they are sitting in this position, sitting one game away from going to the SEC championship game that they haven't done in a modern era. I mean, their last true SEC championship was in 1950 when Paul Bear Bryant was coaching the team. They share one with Georgia in 1976, but there were some, technicalities to that. So they haven't seen this. And it's awesome that the SEC East is sitting in this position, because usually one team runs the SEC East each year, it seems like, and it's more so trying to figure out the SEC West in Atlanta. but now it's both sides going neck and neck, and it's this week alone. So
Yeah, what's refreshing about this year is that if you go back about 10 years, you had a number of like Florida Georgia fights, and Florida was obviously dominant. And then they moved on. Well, Urban Meyer moved on, is what happened anyway. And then you had all sorts of seasons where Georgia was supposed to be the best team, and sometimes they were. They obviously 2012 being their best team in a long time. And then you had the Missouri run. You had but it was always the thought that this team that's going to come out of this is really not that good. Florida won 2 consecutive years with Jim McElwain on the sideline, and they weren't that good. They get blown out in the SEC title game. And so there was always the thought that either, yeah, there was one team that was so much better than everyone else, like Georgia last year, that won it, with no issues, beat everyone that they needed to. The division was never really in doubt. Or, yeah, we've got a bunch of mediocre teams and somebody has to win it. This is the first time, okay, in a long time that we had a game this late in the season, okay, head to head, bam, Georgia, what we would have thought maybe Tennessee or Kentucky or something like that, or Florida, I should say, but it's happened to be Kentucky jumping out there. So it's a really good matchup. Now maybe it'll be 21-0 after the first quarter, and then we'll be done with it, and somebody like me will move on to something else. But it's going to be boom, front and center at 3:30 Eastern time for me, because this is to get to the SEC championship game, and once you do that, you're playing for a college football playoff. And unless somebody trips up against a Louisville or Georgia Tech, which I don't foresee, especially on Georgia's side, of course. All right. Any news out of camp? Anything happen this week? Anybody say anything stupid that we can laugh at or make fun of, or anything tweeted out there, Savannah, that we can jump on?
Actually, no, there's not. Georgia's has their guys pretty trained not to, disrespect another team, not talk really any smack when it comes to interviews, especially being asked about opponents and stuff. So there's not anything like that. I will say Ben Kliegel, the offensive lineman that went down with a fractured leg back in September, he is likely going to see some playing time this weekend. Don't necessarily think that he will start, but he is finally healthy enough to where he can start taking reps, start getting hit. And so that's going to be a big plus for Georgia's offensive line if he can come in and be that guy that he needs to on the right side with Isaiah Wilson. Other than that, there's still 2 key defensive linemen that are out for Georgia, which is going to be a struggle in a sense. But at the same time, you also have freshman Jordan Davis, who has really stepped up the past two weeks in LSU and in Florida last week, with helping Tyreek McGee with the strip sack and really developing as a player. He is so physically strong. It's kind of like, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but he is the real life version of the Mountain. And once he gets into physical shape where the staff and the strength and conditioning program wants him, he's going to be like the next All-American defensive lineman out of Georgia. I've been preaching about this kid since he got onto campus, and it's finally coming to fruition. He's finally worked hard enough. I'm really excited to see where he goes in the next couple of weeks. I also think that DeAndre Baker's so hungry. He did Marty and McGee last week before the Florida game, and I've hung out with him a couple times outside of practice and stuff, and that kid looked so ready to go. He is so focused. He has one goal in mind, and that is to get to Atlanta again. And he is one of the biggest leaders in the defense, and is one of the reasons why whenever you see a spark come out of the defense, it's coming from DeAndre Baker. And so that's something that's really crucial for Georgia to continue to get this year. I think that's what we were missing in the first half of the season, kind of when we were trying to figure out what is Georgia doing. They didn't have a defensive leader. And so he's one of the guys that's really stepped up. Him and Natrez Patrick are 2 guys that have really just owned this leadership role. Other than that, there's not really any other big news coming out of Athens. It's just another business week. We didn't get any practice availability today. We did get some the past 2 days, and the guys were doing what they normally do, working through fundamentals, getting ready for Kentucky. And I will note this, that Trey Scott, who is our defensive line coach, his message to the team yesterday was build the wall for the East. This, in other words, this game is going to win the East by who wins in the trenches. And if Georgia's front seven can stop Kentucky's Benny Snell and everything. That's what it is. We're trying to build a wall to contain the East and keep our East title. So that was really probably the only notable thing that I really liked this week. Other than that, it's business as usual, and we're just ready for Saturday.
Georgia, Kentucky on Saturday. Before we turn it over to Kevin McGuffey, and last word on college football on the Wildcats side, I got to hit you with this because there's a few people in the chat that want you to talk about the quarterbacks and apparently remembering, or maybe they're misremembering, that you were calling for Justin Fields to be the starter.
Oh, I was full on ready for him to take his snaps and get a few series in. Don't think I was saying starter, but I could have. I mean, at that point in time, we didn't know whether or not Jake Fromm was going to get out of that sophomore slump. And I don't know that he is necessarily out of the sophomore slump that so many people have put him in. He did what he was supposed to do. He showed up last week, and he managed the team like he did last season. And that's what Georgia needs out of him. I also think that Justin Fields is continuing to grow, learning the playbook, and really getting – accustomed to how things are done at Georgia. Fromm did what he was supposed to do. I remember telling you that if he comes in and does what he's supposed to do, gets, some momentum, there's no reason why that you should take him out and take away from the rhythm that he has going with the offense by putting Justin Fields in. I thoroughly think that Justin Fields should be getting more snaps and getting some playing time, but at the same time, when Fromm's doing what he did against Florida, it's kind of hard to continue to say that. So, yeah, I would love to see Justin Fields get some playing time, but at the same time, stick with Fromm until he proves to you that it's consistently not getting better, if that makes sense.
All right, we got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line from Bulldog Illustrated. The Dogs and the Cats for the SEC East lead. And Savannah, before we let you go, Big Poppy JT on the chat room is going Kentucky 17, Georgia 7. That's his score.
I have to disagree. I don't think that Kentucky's defense is going to be able to stop Georgia's offense to 7 points. LSU's defense couldn't even stop Georgia's offense to under 19 points. And so, that's 16. Fine. 17. Well, sorry.
16.
That's 16. Sorry. My weeks are running together.
But I'm just joking with you. And Big Poppy's not even a Kentucky fan.
That's
just having fun with you.
To be honest, a lot of Florida fans continue to talk this week after the big loss and stuff. So I'm just ready for the team to get on the field and handle business. Whether it ends in a loss or it ends in a win, it's a college football game, and we love this sport because you don't ever know what could happen on a Saturday. I can be as confident as I am right now that Georgia's going to come in and handle business, but at the same time, Kentucky can do the same thing. So that's the biggest reason why I love college football, is because any given day somebody can go in and upset a team. So it's going to be a good matchup. I'm excited. I just hope Georgia's defense, slows down Benny or essentially stops them. I'd love to see Terry Wilson.
All right, Georgia and Kentucky. Savannah, enjoy the game. You're going on up to Lexington, correct?
Yes, I'll be on the sidelines again for the Kentucky game.
All right, maybe you can say hi to Kevin.
Maybe.
All right, Savannah, take care.
Have a good night.
All right, we got Kevin McGuffey on the line as well to give us the other side, the blue side, the big blue side. 7-1, Kevin. Did you believe that it was going to get to this point?
Did I believe it's going to get to this point?
Yeah,
no.
7-1.
No. And for like 59 minutes of the game on this past Saturday, you wouldn't have thought that either. But it was one of the most incredible drives that, Kentucky fans years from now will be talking about the drive, I think, when they talk about this season. And, Terry Wilson comes from being benched to, looking like, Tom Brady or, an Aaron Rodgers on that last drive. And then they got the extra play to beat Missouri. And, we all talked about it afterwards. So these are the kind of things you go back through history. Kentucky's always the Missouri in this situation. You go back to the 93 Peach Bowl, the Bluegrass Miracle, the Florida game last year. Kentucky's always the one, we're the Charlie Brown to the other team's Lucy. And it just, for once, it was on the other, she was on the other foot. And like I said, it's just been, it's everybody's just ready for Saturday now. It's just, let's get here Saturday, 3:30. Let's do this. That's kind of the mindset right now.
So Kevin, I made mention to you after the game, I congratulated you over Twitter or Facebook, and I made the comment that I couldn't see the game. It was on the SEC network, but I checked in and I kept looking at the game cast, and I saw that they had to drive the length of the field. They went 81 yards after they got the big punt return for a touchdown, but that the ESPN Gamecast, because of the way it's automated, because the game hit double zeros, it showed it was confusing because I saw all sorts of different like penalty, but it hit double zero and it said final score, Missouri 14, Kentucky 9, and then of course they got the extra play and Wilson throws the touchdown pass. So regardless of his limitations in the passing game, he laid it in there on the left sideline by the pylon when he needed to, with no time on the clock, and threw for 237 yards, I think was the number.
Yeah, I think it's 267.
267. Man, I shorted him 30 yards. 267, and that does come to mind because I compared that against his highest game previous, which I think was 163. So he showed up and made plays in that final drive in particular, and Lynn Bowden was most of the time the target.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, Lynn Bowden had a career game. We've talked about him numerous times here, and like Saturday, he had the career game. 13 catches, 166 yards, and then had the the punt return for the touchdown. Usually David Bouvier returns the punts for Kentucky, and before when the Kentucky stopped him on third down, Coach Bowden went to Coach Stoops and said, "Look, let me do this. I'm going to take it to the house." And Coach Stoops was like, he said, after the game, it was like, "Okay, you go do your thing," basically, and and that's what he did. Yeah, I mean, he had that breakout performance that and you can see it. He getting better like every game in spurts, and he finally put it all together on Saturday. But yeah, there was I don't know how big a music fan or whatever. There's a Chris Stapleton concert here. He's big. He's from Kentucky. He's real big, country music these days. He's playing a sold out show at Rupp Arena, and that was, a lot of people that had, that because by the time the game was over, that concert, the opening acts were starting, and everybody was on like, Kentucky lost, and then all of a sudden, oh no, Kentucky won, because like I said, as you said, the ESPN thing, it updated or it didn't update, but then like Yahoo or CBS Sports or something, it's showing Kentucky won, and so yeah, there was a lot of confusion for people who didn't actually get to see the game, but yeah, I mean, like I said, Terry Wilson, you can't say nothing but good things about him. We talked about, last week that, Coach Stoops and Eddie Grand, Darren Henshaw were going to play, they played Gunnar Hoke a couple of series. They played Danny Clark for one series. And even Coach Stoops still says he may play Hoke again a couple of series this weekend. So that, that'll be something. But, he, like I said, he came in on that last play. He threw an interception. It was 14-9. He threw an interception with 3 minutes to go. And we're like, I was like, okay, well, same old Kentucky. We're gonna, lose it. And then, but the defense, we have to talk about that defense. Against Drew Lock and a high-powered Missouri offense, 8 3-and-outs in the second half. They did not get a first down in the second half. It was just amazing. And this, I have to give a shout out to Big Poppy there. I like his, I like his way of thinking. I think. I really, I'm not trying to be a homer. I really think Kentucky can win. If we've yet to see somebody score, do a lot of damage against his defense, and until they do, why not? They like to use the phrase "why not Kentucky?" So why not Kentucky?
Absolutely, they can win, and I think it's one of our flaws as sports fans, especially as football fans, that we're more impressed with offense than defense. So if Kentucky marched into this game and they were winning every game 48-45, we'd be like, man, Kentucky's on a roll. They're 7-1. They just beat Florida last week 48-45, and then they beat Vandy 47-44. We would have no issue with that necessarily. Many of us, I shouldn't say, I would certainly be raising the red flag. This defense is horrible, but you know how it is. A lot of people would be like impressed with those scores, but when you inverse it and the scores are 15-14, 14-7, it's like, well, this team's not that good. What's wrong with them? They can't score. They're not going to be able to score against Georgia. But see, the Georgia offense plays the Kentucky defense too. So not saying that the Georgia offense is not capable, because they are, but Kentucky is holding teams down unlike anybody in the conference, and by some measurements, anybody really in the country against this level of competition, where these teams are only scoring 10 and 15 points a game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back and look, I think it's, as far as scoring margin, Kentucky, or not scoring margin, but scoring defense, I think Kentucky's number one. I think they're allowing 13. It's like 13 points a game, and then Clemson, I think, is maybe like 13.4, and then there's somebody else, somebody else in there. You think about, we're 8 games into the season, and the only, 2 teams, Central Michigan scored 20, the first game of the season, and then Texas A&M scored 20, but of course that last touchdown came, in an overtime. Like I said, it's the best. We've talked about this before. Like the years that you always talk about with Kentucky football are 1977, 1984, and 2007, and this is the best, defense that Kentucky's had since 1977. They had a guy, Art Still, who was number 2 pick in the draft that year.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Went on to have a great NFL career. He was the leader of that defense, and that's the kind of numbers that this team is putting up. And the 48 to 45 games, that would have been the years when Hal Mumme was here, where basically the defense was just something they had to do to get the ball back. Because I've seen many, went to many a game and saw many a game where the Kentucky would score, and then he would just do an onside kick and try to get the ball back, and then if the other team scored, it's like, whatever, we'll just try to score. But yes, to your point, the defense is just something that is just, amazing, has been amazing this year. Josh Allen, Jordan Jones, Mike Edwards, Darius West, Derek Beatty, all these guys are just playing. Cash Daniel. They're just, it's just been incredible to watch. Like I said, we've never, as Kentucky fans, we've never had to see, in most of our lifetimes, we've never had a season like this. So
we've got Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football on the line, breaking down the Wildcats side of the big battle with Georgia. That's in the Commonwealth in Lexington. So there'll be plenty of blue showing up, as Kevin displays for us right there. Kevin, you can guess, if I would take a poll in the live chat right now, we've got 32 people watching us right now. And of course, hundreds of thousands will watch this video once it's posted, of course. If we had a raise of hands, and maybe I'll ask people in the live chat, if you can break up your conversation, how many people are rooting for Georgia? How many people are rooting for Kentucky that aren't Kentucky or Georgia fans? You've got the nation behind you. The college football nation is rooting for Kentucky to win this game.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. It's the Cinderella, the Cinderella story, to use a line from Caddyshack. Nobody has expected this. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I think they have probably gained a lot of new fans this year, and, probably the same way with, people rooting against Alabama, because, they've won so much. And, like I said, Kentucky's never been here before. So, why not root for them? So yeah, I mean, I would be interested to see how many people would say, they were rooting for Kentucky as well.
All right, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. Kevin, what do you have lined up, both yourself and the rest of the crew there at Last Word on College Football?
Well, myself, I'm working on, hopefully I'll be out tomorrow. Basically, I'm working on a kind of a recap of how Kentucky got to this point. Somebody had mentioned the fact the other day that the game Saturday will be 6 years to the day that Kentucky fired Joker Phillips as head football coach. And so basically the 6-year journey where, in this day and age of, win now, the athletic director, Mitch Barnhart, and, has shown a lot of patience with Coach Stoops. And it's finally, he said, in his press conference when he first started, said, it's going to take time, but we're going to build an SEC caliber team. We're going to have an SEC caliber defense. And of course, everybody's like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And, and here we are basically on the cusp of the biggest game, like I said, the biggest game that at least in 40 years, if not, like I said, in most of our lifetime. So, I mean, that's the big thing. That's what I'm working on. I think Tony Siracusa has a post up, just went up today talking about the whole Maryland situation. I know that's kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I was, out a lot of this evening, so I haven't got to, hear what else you guys have been talking about. But that's going on. We have our weekly Heisman ratings, our rankings. I think they'll come out tomorrow or Friday. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Even if you're not a Kentucky fan, but you should be anyway. Just search for the Kentucky. Go to Last Word in College Football. You can search for Kentucky or search for my name, and all the stuff will come up. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm working on. It's been kind of fun to go back through the 6 years that Stoops has been here. From the struggles, and then how it's just slowly built to to where we are right now. It's like I said, I keep using the word incredible, but it's just Kentucky fans aren't used to this, and the fact that Kentucky's basketball team plays Duke on Tuesday night, and nobody's really talking about it. So it's all it's everybody's just zoomed in, zeroed in on this game on Saturday.
So either they won't be talking about it Saturday night, or everyone will instantly turn to start talking about it on Saturday night. We'll just have to see how that one plays out. And just to put it in perspective, we've got Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts on 247 coming up next to talk Ohio State football. Of course, the Buckeyes are 7-1, Kentucky 7-1, but at Ohio State, it feels like they're teetering on the brink. People are about to jump off bridges. The season's over. They're number 10 in the country. But for Kentucky, 7-1 sure sounds good. And each week that number has gone up. Of course, that's a good thing. But to go from 7-1 to 8-1, that will be, in particular, very, very sweet. Of course, Kevin.
Oh yeah, because like I said, as you said, you're talking to Savannah. The winner of this game, goes to Atlanta, and I know you probably saw the the college football rankings that came out last night. Kentucky was 9th and Ohio State was 10th. So a lot of the people in our area, Northern Kentucky, live in Ohio, have been kind of excited about that. So like I said, is it going to last? Who knows? But like I said, we're just enjoying the ride right now. And like I said, I can see Kentucky, winning a close game on Saturday, like a 20-17 or 21-14, something. Like I said, until somebody proves that they can whip this Kentucky defense, I just you got to put a lot of stock in what they've done so far.
Yeah, even the game they lost to Texas A&M only scored 14 points in regulation. So nobody's done anything against the defense for the most part. Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football breaking down the Cats, taking on the Dogs, and of course, Dogs and Cats, and it makes sense, but it's a fight for the SEC Eastern Division Championship this particular season. Kevin, we appreciate it. Hopefully, you enjoy the game. And I can't root because you, Savannah, you're both great guests, and I'll just enjoy the game, and we'll talk about it hopefully afterwards.
You can be France.
I just got done studying. I was watching the show while I was studying for my big math test tomorrow.
Okay.
And I just got done, and I was getting ready to take a shower, but I saw a lot of people in the comment section underestimating Kentucky, thinking that they're going to get rolled over. And then I've been telling Georgia fans at school all week that Kentucky is going to humble you guys in the most honest way, because this Kentucky team, when you think about it, Mark, is built just like LSU. Run the ball, not really good on offense, but great defense. And what did LSU do to Georgia? Last time I checked, it was 38-16, and this Kentucky team is built almost identically to LSU, but with a better defense, as the stats show that Kentucky has better defense than LSU. And I think Georgia fans are about to get a rude awakening. And I had Kentucky winning this game, but even if Kentucky doesn't win this game, Georgia fans are going to be having a hard time in the whole entire game, because there's one thing that this Kentucky team has, Mark, and it's grit. When Georgia lost to Auburn, when Georgia lost to LSU, nothing was going right. Nothing was going right on defense. Jay Fromm looked like he couldn't complete a big pass play to save his life. Nothing was going right. But Kentucky, nothing can go right for Kentucky. And they still can find a way to win the game. And that is good, Mark. You don't find it a lot in college football. Kentucky also hasn't allowed the team to score 20 points on them the whole entire season. And I told another Georgia fan that, and they was like, oh, Texas A&M. I was like, Texas A&M averages 400 yards, 500 yards on offense almost every game, or somewhere near that number. And they only had about 200, maybe 300 yards against Kentucky. Do you know how big of a drop-off that is? I was telling them, I was like, that is a huge drop off compared to what Texas A&M normally averages. And then the 20 points, they really only allow 14 because of the overtime. So this Kentucky team is going to humble Georgia in the most humblest way. And Georgia fans' worlds are going to come crashing down because this Kentucky team is going to knock them dead in the mouth. Dead in the mouth. Because Kentucky doesn't have nothing, everything against Missouri, it was like nothing was going right. They had 8 straight 3-and-outs. The defense I believe the defense allowed 14 points in the first half. And then in the second half, the defense didn't allow no more points out of Missouri. And then Kentucky's offense still came out slow. But in the fourth quarter, everybody hates on my dog Terry Wilson. But when Terry Wilson needed to show up, what did he do? He showed up and wasn't game for Kentucky. And now he's a big man on campus. And he has to play the best game of his life that he's ever played in football. Pop Warner football, middle school football, high school football, JUCO college football, all that, all those performances, it all comes down to this game against Georgia. He has to play the best game he's ever played in all his years playing college football or football in general. And I believe Kentucky's going to win this game 17-7 because just like this team is built just like LSU, Mark, just like LSU or nearly identical. And Georgia is going to have no answer, and they're going to lose 17-7.
Okay, there you hear it right there from Big Papi. Of course, I'm going to have my prediction a little bit later in the week. I'm not going to give it away right now because I have no idea what I'm going to predict once I review these two teams. But I've seen, let's see, Georgia play most of the LSU game. Georgia hasn't really played many good teams, so I haven't seen them play that much. But I watched the Florida game just about every play. Kentucky I saw play a little bit against Mississippi State. I saw some of the Texas A&M game. I saw them play South Carolina a little bit, some of the Florida game and Texas A&M. Yeah. So, it should be a really interesting game in the Wildcats playing defense about as well as anybody in the country right now, but they cannot turn over the ball, and they need to get something out of that passing game, which they did get on the road at Missouri last week out of Terry Wilson. So hopefully he's on his game if you're a Kentucky fan, because they're going to need that desperately.